song called You Can Depend on Me. In its simplest, it goes. Now in a medium 2-beat tempo. That swings. One of the things I did, one of the devices I employed, was one I mentioned to you earlier, and that is the matter of playing the musical ideas that occurred to me in octave form, with that little roll at the end of certain phrases. Again. Then another thing I did in other parts of that was adding the fifth. We explained that sometime back in the video cassette. So those are two of the pieces or gimmicks that we used. And then in the left hand, to get that kind of bouncy, ba-chink, chink, 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 bump, bump, ba-chink. First of all, you select the tempo, which goes without saying. But in addition to just keeping the tempo strict, you also, as I say, want to make it swing. The old great players of the 20s and 30s would have done the stride stuff, but most of us are too lazy to bother about that, and you can get the same effect. It's sort of modified stride. Chicka-chink, 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 chicka-ding, 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 chicka-ding. And you can, in addition to that, chicka-ding, chick-ding, bump-ba-doo-ba-doo-doo, doo-bip-boom, ba-doo-ba-doo, ba-dum, ba-dum, boom, boom, cha-bum-ba-dum-bum, cha-bum-bum, boom. That's the common approach that was very common in, as I say, the 30s. But you can also add a little of the Errol Garner left-hand technique to it. That's the way, as I say, Errol Garner used to play. Not necessarily those same notes, but picking up every beat. And then in addition, since you don't want to play the whole thing with this style, occasionally you'll play little single note figures, for example. Remember the old free fake run? You notice how I worked it in there? So once you learn these gimmicks, then the trick is to learn when to use them. Sometimes when not to use them, too. And you put all that together, and it spells whatever it does. I've earlier mentioned that my favorite piano player. I'm not knocking the other giants, but there's some emotional reaction I get from a man named Errol Garner. I once wrote a novel, my first novel, one steamy summer in New York City, sitting with an occasional can of cold beer next to my typewriter and getting up about every 25 minutes to turn over an album by Errol, an old Yellow Label 10-incher, because he was playing beautiful ballads, and he's the most romantic player of all time, jazz or non-jazz. Beautiful style. He really had two separate styles. We could maybe say three or four, but two that dominate. One is this, one of the great swingers of all time, and the other was his romantic ballad style. One of the distinguishing features of his, and there's not much point in your working hard to learn it, because whenever anybody does it, he always sounds like he's imitating Errol Garner, the way that a performer might imitate Jimmy Cagney. There's nothing wrong with that. It's nice to be able to do that impression. But oddly enough, Earl was on such a planet of his own that, again, to imitate him or be influenced by him is always to sound as if you're doing him. The ballad stuff is so pretty, I do it anyway. I'm not trying to claim original. It's all Errol's, and of course, I add my own style to it. But his left hand was famous. It sounded like Freddie Green, the guitar player, with Count Basie. It was just one beat per one chord per beat, although he could vary it. See how it sounds like a guitar player? That was the characteristic thing. Then he had a totally different style. It's almost as if there were two separate personalities, multiple personalities, as we say, locked up in that man's wonderful head. And the other one was applied to pretty ballads. I won't even play a song here. I'll just play some chords, but the kinds of things that he used to do. So forth. Even though, as I say, you should not decide to become another Errol Garner, even if you could, it's good to know what he did, monkey around with it, have fun with it. Sometimes it's great fun if you're playing ballads. But since he is one of the giants of piano jazz achievement of all time, you should know a lot about Errol Garner. Great guy and an incredibly magnificent player. That's a song of mine called Spring Is Where You Are, first 16 bars anyway. And I play it by way of making a point, which is that you don't have to wait till, after 14 years of hard work, you finally develop freaky chops. even when you are still limited as regards your finger technique, you can still play very pretty and very listenable things. And there are pianists who deliberately choose not to dazzle the viewer with their technical virtuosity. Art Tatum often would do that, but he could also play simply. And the classic instance, of course, is Count Basie, who, very simple notes, but he could get the whole block swinging. And on ballads, too, if what you're playing is sensible stuff, you don't have to dazzle to be interesting. I'll use as an illustration an old song from, I think, around 1930 called Confessin', or I'm Confessin' That I Love You. Its harmonies were pretty simple, but they're pretty, and I'll deliberately play pretty slowly, although occasionally I'll throw in a little Tudelio stuff, so you can see how you can play, again, simply and yet okay. We'll just start without an intro. By the way, a couple of little ending tricks you might want to employ. You're ending this, let's say, in E flat on some version of an E flat chord, but it's pretty if you go up a half step into an E-based thing. So you're really working with this, but you're going up a half step. Now you resolve that by going back to your E flat, and here's another gimmick trick. Instead of playing as you would expect some completion of the E flat chord, you deliberately go one step higher into F. Now at first you might think you can't be playing an E flat thing and an F thing at the same time. They don't make sense, but you're wrong. Or I was wrong and I ever thought that. Anyway, here's how they sound together. Here's your E flat, here's your F. Isn't that nice? Sort of a chime effect. So again, the tricks are as follows. If you're in E flat, you go up, and if you're ending something in F, you go up half the step. And if you were ending again in the F, then the chord you would play in your right hand is a G. Or you can play notes one at a time. Tricks of the trade.